Hey friends, welcome to the broadcast today. You're not going to hear the normal music because our radio station base, the power is out. They were trying to regain power, work with a generator, but we're unable to broadcast on our normal radio stations. However, nothing's stopping us from broadcasting here on YouTube and on Facebook. So welcome to the broadcast. And today, it's our 47th wedding anniversary. Yes, Nancy and I have been married for 47 amazing years now. Thursday, I turned 68, which means, do the math. We got married right before I turned 21. Nancy turned 21 right before me, which she's not let me forget, because when we flew out to California, my dad paid for our honeymoon. We flew out to California, and so now this is one day before I turned 21, go to sign for the rental car. I couldn't because I wasn't 21 yet. She had to sign for the rental car. Anyway, I want to talk to you today about keys to a happy marriage, keys to a blessed marriage, and of course, talking in particular from a biblical perspective. So we won't have any normal commercial breaks, and somewhere along the line, I will take some questions. So if you have a question for me relating to marriage, relating to family, feel free to post it either in the YouTube chat or the Facebook chat, and I'll try to get to some questions. We may not go the full hour today. We'll see. But I may get to some of your questions as well. And I may take some random questions. So if you want to make sure that the questions are seen, put at AskDrBrown first. This will stand out from just chat going back and forth. All right, so 47 years of marriage. It just seems amazing. I am absolutely so in love with Nancy. We have an amazing, wonderful relationship, and God really did put together a right match with us. So let's start there. That if you're starting from scratch, if you're starting at the beginning, you're not in the midst of a marriage, it's not that you got married, you weren't believers, then one of you became a believer. Let's start first that you're going to be getting married. Obviously, you want to marry the right person. Now, you may not know what the perfect right person is for you. In other words, you may have a particular idea, I'd love to marry someone like this, or I'd love to marry someone that looks like this, or I'd love to marry someone that's spiritual like this, or I'd love to marry someone that's wealthy like this, or I'd love to marry someone that has these habits or hobbies, whatever. And you may not know what the ideal match really is, but God knows. So I don't mean that God's going to lead you to marry someone that you don't get along with at all, that's totally incompatible, and we just have to trust the Lord. No, I mean that you want to start by putting God in the middle of everything. You want to start by putting God first, and by saying, Lord, especially if you desire to marry, Lord, I believe it's your will that I marry. It's my desire. You haven't given me a gift to not want to marry. So bring the right person in my life at the right time. And prepare me, help me to be the kind of person that you want me to be, because obviously marriage is a two-way street. So until God brought Nancy into my life, at that point I was saved 2.5 years, I prayed pretty much on a daily basis. I didn't pray like this right at the beginning, but once I started to pray like this, it was one prayer I prayed every day. Lord, give me the one you have for me, when you have her for me, and give me patience until you do. And of course, every day I was going to the Lord to spend quality time, hours with him, and to be more like him, and to immerse myself in the Word and fellowship with God. That was just an always thing that happened. So it was 2.5 years saved, and then God brings Nancy to the church, a Jewish atheist, really no reason under the sun for her to step into the walls of a church building or to have any interest in God or anything. But God works supernaturally. It's a long story as to how she got there, but God set it up providentially, supernaturally, brought us together. I got to share the gospel with her. We talked over a period of time. God wonderfully saved her. 1 week later, we were going together. I didn't think it happened that quickly. I mean, here I'm 2.5 years in the Lord. I'm established, right? Well, God brought us together 1 week after he saved her, and we spent weeks together before that, talking and sharing the gospel, etc. God saved her, and then 1 week later, we were in love, and I knew we'd be spending the rest of our lives together. It was that deep, it was that beautiful, it was that wonderful. So if God can bring me, a hippie, drug-using, rebel, Jewish rock drummer kid, into a little Italian Pentecostal church that maybe on a Sunday would have 100 people if it was filled, all right? If God could bring me there and save me, and then bring another Jewish woman, because neither of us were thinking, have to marry a Jewish person, but this was God's plan. Bring another Jewish person, an atheist, into the same little church building. And it was a providential way that he set the whole thing up. He can bring someone in your life. He has the power to do it. And I know some say, look, I don't live around others, or there's no one my age, or things like that. So I've used, Christian dating sites. God can work through any of that. I'm not saying he can't and doesn't work through any of that, but I'm saying have faith that God can bring the right person in your life. In fact, let me just tell you a couple more details. I said it's a long story. I'll try to condense it. There was a young man in the congregation, got saved about the same time I did, named Danny. He got a job at a veterinarian's office and then got sick the first week and got fired. And I was over at his house talking to him, and he goes, Mike, I know God gave me that job. I can't believe I got fired. I said, Danny, you got sick. You didn't show up for work the first week, whatever it was. Of course you got fired. He goes, I know God gave me that job. Well, a few days later, they call him back. They said, well, we actually would like to rehire you. Well, Nancy was working a job. She was a cashier. She was looking for another job. She goes to this veterinarian's office and says, I'd like to work here. They said, well, we haven't hired any women to work here, and we're not planning on it. A little while after, they call her, and they say, yeah, we're going to hire you. So here God brings Danny to the same vet's office. He gets fired because he didn't show up for work because he was sick. They rehire him. God brings Nancy to that same vet. I mean, how many thousands of places are there that they each could have found places to work on Long Island? Hundreds, thousands of potential places, right? They had no history, no connection with each other whatsoever. God brings Nancy there, and then we haven't hired women in this position. Then they hire her. And then Danny talks to her, invites her to church. For some reason, she agrees to go, which is totally contrary to her atheism and her negative view of religious people, etc. And then God saves her there. So God can do that. He can bring people together. Have faith for that. And then as a relationship forms, if you're believers, God has to be in the center of it. When I lost a lot of weight, went from 275 pounds at my very highest down to 180 in less than 8 months through radical transformation of our life in 2014, I was joking with Nancy one day, and I said, hey, so you're more attracted to me now? And she said, I didn't marry you because of your looks. We were both laughing. She was not attracted to me physically, like, oh, that's the man of my dreams. And in fact, when she first walked into our church building, and she happened to see me up front, whatever I looked a stereotypical way to her, she said to herself, I would never go out with somebody like that. Now, come on. How often does that happen? That it's one thing you see someone's like, oh, I'd like to get to know that person. You're attracted to them, right? Love at first sight or whatever it is. It was the opposite with her. How often do you have that opposite reaction? I've seen plenty of people that are unattractive and in personality, whatever, and I never thought, before I knew Nancy, I'd never go with them. It doesn't even occur to you. That was actually the thought she had when God saved her, and she saw Jesus in me. That's what drew us together. So if God is in the middle of your relationship and you get saved as believers, and now one of you begins to fall away from the Lord, that's going to be trouble in the marriage, because it's not just that your personalities were compatible, but that God brought you together. And if you both get stale in your relationship to God, you're going to have problems. So it's always important to keep a strong and good relationship with the Lord, because he is the glue, and he is the one that really makes you compatible. You're compatible in him. Outside of him, Nancy and I never would have talked, never would have known each other, never would have thought of getting married or anything like that. In him, we were drawn together. All right, so that's this one obvious thing of keeping God central. A second thing is put one another first. If you both commit to do that, which means crucifying the flesh, which means crucifying your anger and your pride and your self-righteousness, and I have a right, because you're married, right? You made a lifelong commitment before God to one another. And as believers, you should understand divorce is not an option. That should be your mindset. I'm not saying that if someone divorces you, they walk away from you, that you're in sin because they divorced you. No, you've been hurt as a victim, and God can work and restore things in your life in many ways. And I'm not saying that if, let's say, a man commits adultery multiple times and says to the wife, I'm out of here, and she has a right to divorce him, Scripture. Yes, I believe that. But I'm saying your mentality as believers in marriage should be divorce is not an option. Divorce is nothing we think about. It's not in our vocabulary because we made a lifelong commitment before God. And if God joins you together, then people shouldn't separate it. So when you think like that, and in our 47 years, the word never came up. It was just never a discussion. It was never came up in any way, all right? But if in your mind you're thinking, well, I could always divorce. No, you can't. You can't. If you got married in the sight of God and made a lifelong commitment one to another, it's not just, we're not really getting along these days. Or, I think I'd like somebody more spiritual. Or, look, the spark of romance isn't there anymore. Or, she doesn't look the way, he doesn't look the way, they don't treat me. Those aren't options for divorce. So we have to get that out of our minds. And especially if it's never in your mind, that's wonderful. But you have to understand, okay, I made a commitment before God to this person. I made a commitment before God. And that means I have to live that commitment out. And that means I have to choose to do the loving thing even when I don't feel love, when I don't feel loved, or I don't feel love in me. Either way, I have to choose to do the loving thing. If you will put the other person first, humble yourself and honor them and put them first, almost everything can be fixed. Again, if somebody wants out, they walk away from God, they want out, there's only so much you can do. But I'm talking about in other situations, in normal marital situations, if you will determine, I'm going to humble myself, I'm going to kill the pride and put my spouse first and try to see, okay, what's bothering them, what's hurting them, what can I do to fix this? Almost always things can be fixed. You may need counseling in a difficult situation to give you wisdom because things are so volatile. But even without that, if you'll follow this policy of humble yourself, crucify your flesh, put your spouse first, you'll find blessing. The example that comes to mind the most as I think about this is a real small thing. And I'm thinking back where we lived when this happened, say 15, 17 years ago, 18 years ago maybe. So ways back. I forget what the thing was, but it was some little dispute that we had. But I remember exactly where we were when it happened. It was some little dispute that we had. And I said to myself, I'm not going to humble myself again. I'm not going to be the one to go first, say, I'm sorry, I apologize, because I always go first. I always apologize first. That was my mentality back then, right? And I'm not going to do it again. And so we were having a conflict. And right at that moment, God convicted me of my pride. Like, you are going to make a decision not to have a right attitude before God, because my attitude before God was wrong at that moment. So think of that. I don't care if your spouse said something or did something that offended you or upset you. Is your attitude now right before God? Is it pure before God? Could God put a spiritual x-ray of your attitude out in front of the whole world to look at and say, yeah, thumbs up, good attitude in the midst of this conflict? So I was convicted of my prideful response before God. And I said to Nancy, obviously something's bothering you because you reacted a certain way. So rather than, why are you treating me like that? It was, no, put her first. I said, obviously something's bothering you because you reacted like that. So what did I do to upset you? Instantly, everything was as calm as could be, as loving as could be. And she said, yeah, when this happened, it hurt. It's like she just wanted to communicate with me and to recognize that I had done something that had hurt her or had offended her or had pushed her away, whatever it was. And the moment I humbled myself, the communication was there. Now, it's not always that quick and that easy, but as a life principle, let me speak as a man. I know what the Lord says to me as a man, as the husband. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. So I know that in marriage, it is my role as the husband to give myself for Nancy. So that means I put my preferences behind her preferences. And the thing that's amazing is when you do that, and you do it in a godly way, not in a bitter way, all right, fine, you get your way again. No, just gladly, joyfully, right? It's often little petty things, little small things. Just, hey, your preference, right? I joke with people that the wedding is the bride's day, and then after that is the bride's life, right? But when you do that, men, brothers, your wife will respond the way you want her to. That you'll get the wife that you want to get as you do. It's not a one-sided thing. And I know everyone's going to give me the exception. I'm just saying I'm going to follow scriptural principles here. And I can tell you now, I can tell you by God's grace, 47 years later, these scriptural principles work. You say, well, what do you mean by put her first? Okay, little things. She likes the temperature warmer or cooler than I do. Fine, I can always take a sweater off or put a sweater on. That's fine. She would rather do this. I have a preference to do that. No, there are endless things we'll discuss. Like, hey, whatever you want, etc. But if you can put your spouse first, and then husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, you'll get the right response that you desire to get. Over a period of time, it'll cultivate that kind of love. It's like watering a plant in that regard, that it then flourishes and is strengthened. It'll be the same with your marriage. You say, well, you must be like some kind of servile person. Well, first, let's serve one another. We're called to serve one another in the body. We're called to serve one another. Leaders are called to be the chief servants, right? So we all serve one another. That's great. And we all should humble ourselves before God and one another. That's great. That's healthy. That's good. That's fine. Amen. Why not? But see, the fact is, Nancy completely releases me to be me. Nancy completely releases me to run my race. And she does not have a lot of personal needs like needing friends around or people around her all the time. So, I'll say, hey, I've got this invitation, but it's going to be extended. I'm going to be away 2 weeks. No, you need to go do that. You just need to go do that. I can be up right until 3 in the morning. Hey, you need to be doing what God's called you to do. And then above all, if I was just meeting with God in prayer, so you just need to be with God. That's the most important thing you can do. She's the one that urged me to do these monthly prayer retreats. She said, you just got to break through in a deeper level of God if you want to see his plans fulfilled. So she releases me to do everything God's called me to do. And the extent I do that, she respects me for it. So wives, respect, honor, submit to your husband. The flip side, I'm not one that needs a lot of personal building up. I have trials and tests like everybody else, but I walk around in a lot of personal encouragement in the Lord, a lot of positivity, a lot of faith, a lot of holy optimism all the time. I mean, I'm so sure that my best years in the Lord are ahead. I'm so sure that our best years of marriage are ahead. I'm so sure that the best years of the church are ahead as God moves in our midst. I have this overwhelming confidence that I live with. I don't need someone to pat me on the back all the time. And everybody's different. Some men carry certain burdens. They're incredibly hardworking and faithful and devoted husbands and fathers, but they need a lot of encouragement. They need a lot of, hey, hon, you're doing great. We love you. We believe in you. I don't need that. I don't need that. But if, as a wife, you despise your husband, as a wife, if you look down on your husband, as a wife, if you don't esteem your husband, it's very deflating. It's very difficult. Again, I don't need that as much as others. I need other things from Nancy that she brings. One of them, she's just an absolute truth teller, right? And we joke that she's the lead weight that keeps my helium balloon from flying away. But the flip side, in terms of what Paul says and counsels, is wives, respect your husbands, submit to your husbands. So he said, he's not worthy of respect. Well, the husband could say, the wife's not worthy of my love. That's immaterial. No one said that they're worthy of it all the time. This is our responsibility to bring it, right? My responsibility to lay down my life for my wife, her responsibility to respect and honor me. So it would be easier if you're more honorable. Oh, okay. And it'd be easier if you're more lovable. This is where we kill our flesh and we do our part. Look, if you sinned against me and in the midst of you sinning against me, I lost my temper with you. You are 90% guilty. I'm 10% guilty in the overall conflict. Well, in the sight of God, though, I'm still 100% responsible for my 10%. I still have to take on that responsibility. And if that means apologizing to you before you're apologizing to me, I got to get things right with God. So part of the putting one another first, part of the honoring one another is you do your part. So to the wives who say, my husband's not really worthy of respect, seek the Lord about it and start seeking to treat your husband with respect, with honor, because of the calling he has as husband and the one that has to carry ultimately the weight of the responsibility of the marriage and family and finances and things like that. Treat him with respect, and you'll see him act more respectably. Husbands, my wife, she's just puts off, she's nasty, she's not as she used to be. Love her. Lay down your life for her. Seek to make her life easier. Try to help her. You'd be amazed to see what comes out of that. And obviously, as you're building a relationship leading up to marriage, get to know each other as well as you can. You know, there are arranged marriages in different cultures. There are arranged marriages in ultra-Orthodox Jewish cultures. There are arranged marriages in Hindu cultures, I'm sure in Muslim cultures. And I saw an ultra-Orthodox Jewish woman make the statement, we don't marry the one we love the one we marry. Well, obviously, in that culture, that's how it has to work. The parents, the matchmakers, they do their best to make things as compatible as possible. They really work hard to make that happen. And they try to work out a marriage that they think will be good for everyone. Sometimes they have other goals. They have political goals or social goals or financial goals, and they match a couple together, and it's up to the couple to work things out. So theoretically, almost anybody could make things work, but thankfully we're not in that situation in our lives. We can choose the ones we marry. So really get to know each other well. Spend a lot of time, communicate openly, honestly. And then within the marriage, be sensitive to each other. When you see something's wrong, when you see a drifting, when you see the connections not there, when you see there's more shortness or snappiness or lack of patience or lack of concern, don't just ignore it. It's like, okay, what's going on? What's going on? You don't seem yourself. And don't put it on them, because you could be the one that's put them away, pushed them away. It could be used to be so focused on them and really gave attention to them and really interacted and really were excited to know what's happening in their lives. And now you just got so busy with your own life. And for me, it's always a challenge to be focused in the present, right? That your lack of doing that now pushes the other person away. And in the process, you're like, well, what's the matter with you? Okay, it's actually not them, it's you. But either way, you want to be sensitive. Hey, what's going on? And I'll tell this last story, and then I'm just going to look at some questions that have come in. But one quick story, trying to think of where we lived when this happened. Yeah, so this is maybe about 10 years ago, maybe a little less. So I'm walking out the door one day, and I said to Nancy, I was on my way to the office. I said, everything all right? She goes, yeah, everything's fine. I said, oh, okay. A few days later, bedtime, just about to fall asleep. We're chatting, and I'm tired, just about to fall asleep. And I said, honey, you sure everything's okay? She goes, yeah, mm-hmm. Then a few days later, it's the middle of the day, nothing's going on. I don't have anywhere to go. I sit down with her, and I said, so, hon, you don't seem yourself. What's going on? And she just started to unburden herself and just tell me what was going on. And just some pressures she'd come under, different things. And I said, well, I asked you the other day when I was leaving, if everything was okay. And you said, yeah. And then I asked you right before we fell asleep the other night if everything was okay. And you said, yeah. I said, obviously everything wasn't okay. She said, yeah, but you didn't care. She said, you don't ask just as you're walking out the door with 2 seconds or just before you fall asleep when you're about to lose consciousness. If you care, you don't ask then. So I was not worthy of her sharing what was going on because I didn't really care enough to make time for it. And if I didn't care enough to make time for her to unburden her heart and tell me what was going on, then she couldn't tell me in a couple of seconds, right? And she wouldn't. So it's just a reminder to be sensitive, to be attentive. I don't mean that every day is like the spark of romance and every day you have flowers and special meals for each other and that every night is date night. Although I can tell you after 47 years that I am madly in love with my amazing wife and that our relationship is amazing, and that is such a God-given relationship that he brought us together. And she would say the exact same things. And I thoroughly enjoy her. But at the same time, yeah, I can be unattentive because I'm going in so many directions and here and there. I've had to learn, okay, come back from travel, get home, focus. Now, she may be busy. She may be in the backyard, busy working in the garden. It's like, oh, we'll talk later. I just got back from a long trip. We'll talk later. But otherwise, hey, I got to give my focus because I've been away. My attention's been given elsewhere. Let's make sure that we're in communication, that we're in touch. And then everybody finds their own rhythm. We hardly ever pray together. What? From our earliest days in the Lord. If there was something we were burdened with, I'd go in one room and she'd go in another room, and we'd both seek God. Now, there are times we pray with our family together, with our kids, but it's just never been the way that we really go after him. And if I put pressure on him, you're going to pray prayers in my presence a certain way, that would be uncomfortable for her spiritually, right? Everybody's different. She will spend hours and hours with God. I will spend hours and hours with God, but we rarely do that together in the same room at the same time. Now, we may talk about spiritual things endlessly, but everybody's different. Don't try to put your spouse into a particular mold. You're a public speaker, you want your spouse to be a public speaker. You're a musician, you want your spouse to be a musician. You like quiet, solitude, you want your spouse to like quiet, solitude. Let everybody be who they are, and then find your places of compatibility. And where you have differences, bring them to the Lord. Lord, how does this work? Because I've got one burden, she's got another burden. I've got one perspective, she's got another perspective. How does this work? And what we had to learn over the years, because she has this red light in her that's been infallible as long as I've known her, where she just knows she knows something is wrong or something's going to go wrong, and it's never been wrong. It may happen once in a few years, but it's never been wrong. But she may have some warnings and concerns, and I may have a big green light. Well, how's that work? Well, we learned, okay, I've got to factor in her warnings and concerns to go along with my green light. And then when that happens, everything works well. And if I don't factor in her warnings and concerns, then we have problems. On the other hand, if I don't go through the green light, then I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So you learn how you communicate, how you have, one has one perspective, one has another, one has one vision, one has another. Don't try to recreate your spouse in the image of your mom or your dad or this pastor's spouse or that pastor's spouse or this person, business person, whoever. Let them be who they are, encourage their own walk in the Lord, and give them space to be who they are, and you'll see a flourishing relationship. Anyway, obviously I could go on much more and tell you endless stories, but those are a few things that come to mind. And with that, let's just see. David asks, what's the best way to remain free from offense in a marriage? So getting offended, especially since those closest to us often offend us the most, me included. Yeah, obviously, the people that we love the most and live closest with are the ones that can most easily get on our under our skin or upset us. So this has to be, David, between you and God. In other words, okay, I feel like I have a reason to be offended. I feel like I have justification for being offended. I feel like I have a worthy, proper reason for being offended. However, in the sight of God, I don't. In the sight of God, my attitude is wrong. So what I have to do is crucify that flesh, get with the Lord. And as I get with the Lord, clear my attitude before God, forgive where I need to forgive, put down my self-righteousness where I need to, humble myself. And then in doing that, know that God will pour out grace on me. And even if my spouse doesn't get things right immediately, let's say it's on their end as well, then I can still be under the blessing of God and free. So it's got to be a Godward thing. And then also ask yourself, what will my offense lead to? Isn't it based in pride or stubbornness or personal anger or some sense of rights? So what will my offense lead to? And where will it go in the relationship? Think in those terms as well. Let's see. Kathy, does your ministry travel schedule posed many problems. I don't know how much you travel together for ministry. My ministry travel schedule presents zero problems for our relationship, zero, as long as when I'm home, I'm focused, and when trips are more extensive, that we go over the calendar together. Even when I didn't travel when the kids were real little, but when I did my first trip, let me just see. So 1987, going to England for like a week. So the kids are already at 9, 10 years old at that point, 8, 9 years old, whatever it would have been, time of the year. So that's the first time I went away. And then Nancy and I went to Italy later that same year. There was about a week, and friends who stayed with the kids. But as travel started to increase, say by like the early 90s, I might go on a trip that could be 2 weeks or it could be 3 weeks. Everybody was good with it. I've talked to our daughters over the years. Did you ever feel you didn't have a dad? No, not at all. Everything was great. Nancy ran the house. They got on a good schedule, and everybody was fine. The key thing was when I came home that I was focused. So our joke now is I could be leaving the house. Oh, hon, where are you going again? Timbuktu. When will you be back? 8 days. Oh, could you run to the store before you go? So it's 100% fine. Nancy is very happy being alone and actually enjoys being alone. So when I'm home, she's thrilled I'm home, and we live our lives together in a wonderful way. But it poses no problem. But that's why another reason God brought us together. One thing we learned during COVID, I thought she had this tremendous grace that she was good with me being alone, that she was good with me being away. What we didn't realize is not just she was good with me being away, she actually has a need to be alone as well. So she started joking with me after I was home for 5 straight months, didn't travel anywhere during COVID. She said, honey, the nations need you. We were laughing. Honey, the nations need you. So as long as we communicate about my schedule, and then when I'm home that I'm focused, she's great with it. She's fine with it. I just got an invitation to go a pretty distant place. I've been there recently, was asked to go back. They said, we know it's really short notice, and it's going to be in the midst for me of a crazy schedule. I said to Nancy, I said, here, take a look at it. She goes, no, you should go. God used you there last time. You should go. I just added in these extra days. But that's the way she is. That's the way I am. Other people would get absolutely devastated, worn out with my travel schedule, or otherwise would have had it. It's like, you're hardly even home. But in our case, it works great. And there's never, ever, in all my decades of travel, ever been a complaint unless I didn't go over the schedule with her and something was excessive or a bad time of the year, or I was not focused when I got home. But it's never been an issue. That's part of the divine arrangement. Let's see. So Joey did explain how we met, but thanks for the happy anniversary. But again, in the same church where I got saved in 71, she got saved in 74, little Italian Pentecostal church in Queens, New York. All right, let's see, a couple more questions. Kingdom Exploits asks, how do you get on the same page when you're struggling to see eye to eye? So these are all really good questions. What you do is you say, okay, we're having a problem. So let me do my best to understand your point of view. And then let me do my best to explain my point of view to you. So we're not going to argue. In other words, I'm not trying to convince you. You're not trying to convince me. I want to understand, all right, tell me why you don't think this is the Lord's will that we do this. All right, let me tell you why I believe it's the Lord's will. And now we just say, okay, God, what do we do? We're at an impasse here. So it's nothing personal now, right? No, that's not the way we discipline our son now, our daughter. No, that's the wrong way to do it. Okay, well, why do you feel that way? Rather than arguing about it, because I'm a debater, I'm a confronter, let me prove my point, right? So instead, okay, step back. So why do you feel that way? Why is that your perspective? Okay, all right. Let me think about it. Let me share mine with you. Let's step back. Let's go to the Lord. And then if you're still in an impasse, try to look at track record. Like in practical wisdom, Nancy is 10 times better than me over the years. or just in, with physical wisdom things like, don't, when you do this, you're going to injure yourself, right? Or if you put this here, this thing is prone to break or whatever. She just has like a lot of practical wisdom along with spiritual wisdom. So I defer. On most practical matters, I defer. On things in terms of overall life direction and carrying the burden of the home, she looks to me as the head of the home to do that. But I defer in things where I realize she's got a really good track record here. And otherwise, the key thing when you have an impasse is to not let it be an impasse of attitude. It's like, hey, hon, I'm listening to you. I hear you. I just don't see it like that. Do you get my perspective? All right, we'll step back. We have to make a decision, and you're going to have to work out how to do that. But you do it in a way where the goal is not to convince the person you're right, but to try to understand each perspective. Once you have that part down, then a lot of the tension will be removed. Can you give a suggestion to all young generations who are going to marry what they should be doing that is right in front of God's eyes? Yes, so obviously, you want to both have solid relationships with the Lord, not putting on some kind of spiritual show for the person you want to marry, but really being solid in the Lord and being open and honest. Be open and honest with each other. I don't mean that you have to disclose every last secret thought you had or struggle or question, but you want to be honest, vulnerable. Just be real. Be real with each other. Cultivate strong personal relationships with God, and really determine that you're going to put him first in your lives. And then, of course, till you're married, keep yourself sexually pure. Just basic things like that. And it just leads to, God does honor that, and your own consciences are more clear. And in the event that's not the person you end up marrying, then you haven't defiled one another in that regard. So those are just some basic things. And to recognize, even if you come from a broken home, that marriage is intended to be something very beautiful. Don't be put off by bad relationships you may have seen. And it's been said your spouse is your best friend, but I don't think there are certain things a spouse should share with the other, not keeping secret, but just better left with the therapist. Okay, I can't speak to that because we've never had to go to a therapist or anything like that. But there's almost nothing that I don't share with Nancy, and almost nothing that she doesn't share with me, except things that are only for the Lord. I would say if something's for the therapist, then it's important that you both know it. But again, I'm not a therapist, and we've never had to go for counseling or anything like that. But yeah, I don't, again, it doesn't mean every last here, let's just say, for example, you're a guy, right? And let's just say you're out with your fiance, and some gal comes walking by in a skimpy bikini. You see her, you look away. You don't have to tell your wife, that lady, she's really very attractive, and in my mind, I could think sinful thoughts, but I was really disciplined and I didn't do it. No, just, hey, you didn't look at the girl, you looked away, end of subject, right? Or the wife doesn't need to say, yeah, that guy, I noticed that he's got a nicer build than you, and I really thought, well, I wish you had. You don't need to say every last thought to each other, right? Obviously, okay? But in terms of who you really are, things that are important, unless it's something that only God can understand and relate to, hey, we share lives together. We share lives together. Hey, I appreciate these questions and this interest, and here we did an uninterrupted broadcast here. Listen, let me encourage you to do one other thing. We didn't play our ads because there was no commercial breaks, but here's a great way that you can support the Line of Fire. There was a gentleman that's given money to our ministry in the past. I said, hey, next time you want to give, I don't mean tens of thousands of dollars, but next time you want to give hundreds of dollars, whatever it was, I said, next time you want to give, because we were talking about health and things like that, I said, rather than donate to us this next time, go to Trivita.com, Trivita, go to Trivita.com, our co-sponsor. Go to Trivita.com and order whatever you like. Here are the supplements I use: nitric oxide, and then MyoHealth and Nopalea. These are the ones I use daily and found real great benefits with them: nitric oxide, MyoHealth, Nopalea. And order that. I said, your first order, 100% of it will go to support the Line of Fire broadcast as we're getting on new stations across the country. Use the code BROWN25, you get a 25% discount. So why don't you do that? If you want to make a donation, if you want to stand with us, do something that'll benefit you as well. And 100%, literally 100% of that first order will go to support the Line of Fire. And then if the products are a blessing to you and you think, hey, this is something I'd like to get on a monthly basis, then over a tithe of all future orders will go to support. So it's a great way for you to add to your routine. Obviously, healthy eating comes first and exercise is important. These supplements are really, really excellent in so many ways and will enhance the overall wellness in your life. So take advantage of this. Go to Trivita.com, use the code BROWN25. Also, another way that you can support us is if you're enjoying the supplements or you know other people really into working out, or older folks that are just concerned with maintaining balance and fighting arthritis and inflammation and different things, just share this with them. Hey, go there and use the code BROWN25. They don't even have to know us. And 100% of the first order and then over a tithe of the subsequent order will go to help us. Here's the other thing you could do. Call this number now, 800-771-5584. 800-771-5584. Tell them Dr. Brown sent you. Just ask for a free consultation. You can say, hey, I'm interested in this, or what would you recommend on this? They'll be glad to help you. And the same deal, 100% of your first order will go to support the Line of Fire broadcast. Won't go anywhere else. Won't go into any of our other outreach, just to expand our reach across the nation. And then subsequently over a tithe of your order will be donated. So that's 800-771-5584. Hey, with that, looks like I've answered the questions that came in over on YouTube. It has been a joy to be with you on our 47th anniversary. God bless.